He took off his shirt like it meant nothing. I took off my ring like it meant everything. But that was later. Before that, it was just a car, a storm, and a silence that was supposed to be temporary. My name is Erin, 38, married 12 years, mother of one, quiet on the outside. I've always been good at stillness. I learned early that people leave you alone when you smile just enough, when you know how to nod at the right time, when you smooth your dress before speaking and never say too much. There's power in invisibility if you know how to use it. But sometimes on the very rare nights where the lights flicker and the weather forgets to behave, something starts to stir under the surface. And you realize you've spent years being a shape someone else drew. That evening we were driving back from Mark's family's lake house. One of those exhausting gatherings where people pretend a little too hard to be happy. The kind of weekend filled with clinking glasses, unspoken resentments, and smiles that felt rehearsed. I had made 3 casseroles, 2 polite jokes, and exactly 0 mistakes. I had done my part. Now all I wanted was to go home, take a long shower, and sink into bed in a room where nobody asked anything of me. But the car had other plans. Somewhere past 9 p.m., in the stretch of highway that curls between nothing towns, the engine coughed. Then choked. Then died completely. Mark cursed. Pulled over. Tried the ignition again, as if wishing might wake it. It didn't. We stood on the shoulder, wind slick with humidity. The air smelled like warm metal and burnt oil. The headlights cut through the dark, but the road was empty. I stood a few feet away, arms crossed. Mark slammed the hood shut and pulled out his phone. Toes on the way, he muttered. How long? Hour, maybe more. I said nothing, just nodded. And that's when Dylan pulled up. Dylan was Mark's cousin. Younger. Late 20s, maybe? Fitter in the way people who don't have kids tend to be. Always helpful. Always cheerful. Always made me feel vaguely unsettled, but I never questioned why. He'd driven down in his own truck earlier that weekend, left separately from the lake house. Now he slowed beside us, window down, music humming from inside. You good? He asked, peering out. Car's dead, Mark said. Dylan parked behind us and climbed out. His shirt was fitted, his sleeves pushed up, his hair tousled by the wind. He looked like someone who didn't take things personally. I can take Erin back, he offered. Mark didn't hesitate. Yeah, that'd help. No point both of us sitting here. I opened my mouth, closed it again. Because of course I'd go. Because what choice was there? Dylan smiled, that easy kind of smile that makes everything sound like a favor, not a shift in gravity. Just 45 minutes, he said, opening the passenger side door for me. The ride started fine. Quiet music. Empty road. Rain beginning to mist on the windshield. I sat with my hands in my lap, wedding ring cool against my skin. He drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on his thigh. I watched his forearm flex every time he turned. Not because I meant to, just because the silence made everything visible. At some point, the rain picked up. Then thunder. Then a warning on the radio. Dylan frowned. We should pull over. Roads might flood. There's nothing out here. There's a roadside place a few miles ahead. Motel or something. I nodded. Okay. When we turned into the gravel lot, the world was already half drowned. The inn was small, dimly lit. One flickering neon sign that buzzed as we stepped under the overhang. Inside, the woman behind the desk looked half asleep. Dylan asked for a room. She slid him a key. One left, she said. Storms got everyone stopping. I didn't ask if they had to. I didn't ask anything at all. The room smelled like damp carpet and soap. Dylan set down the key, shook water from his sleeves, and pulled off his jacket. He dropped it on the chair by the window. Then turned to me. You can take the bed. I opened my mouth to protest, but then he reached for the hem of his shirt and pulled it over his head in one easy motion. Not slow, not suggestive, just routine. But something in my chest broke. A tight thread, somewhere in the center of me, snapped. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about attraction. It was about how easily he shed something, as if he wasn't carrying the weight of anything at all. I turned away, not out of modesty, out of fear I might stare. The bathroom light buzzed when I turned it on. The mirror was streaked and cracked in the corner. I stood in front of it anyway, and looked. My hair was frizzy, my eyes tired. My dress still clung to my sides from the rain. My ring gleamed under the cheap overhead bulb, but I didn't look like a wife. I didn't look like a mother. I looked like a woman who had been holding her breath for too long. And I felt something strange in my stomach. A want. Not for him. For space. For quiet. For myself. For the shape of a life I couldn't name but could almost see. When I came back out, he was lying on the bed, scrolling his phone. He didn't look up. I sat in the chair by the window. Outside, the storm rolled on. Inside, I felt the first stirrings of something I hadn't let myself feel in years. A beginning. And something else. Like a door inside me had opened just a crack. The storm outside was loud but far away. That was the strange part. Inside the room, it felt insulated. Still. Not quiet, exactly. The rain still tapped on the windows and the thunder growled now and then, but all of it felt distant. Like we'd stepped out of real time. Like everything else had been put on hold. Dylan hadn't moved from the bed. One arm tucked under his head, his phone resting on his chest. I stood just inside the bathroom door for a second too long. Not because I was deciding what to do. I already knew I wasn't getting into that bed, but because I didn't trust myself not to look at him. Bare skin. Relaxed chest rising with his breath. No tension. No awareness of himself. That's what startled me. His body wasn't self-conscious. It wasn't inviting anything. He was just there. I hadn't been just there in years. I sat in the same chair by the window. Damp clothes, tired eyes, ring cool on my finger. And him, on the bed, bare-chested, half asleep. We didn't speak. After a few minutes, Dylan murmured, "You sure you don't want the bed?" "I'm good." He nodded, didn't push. Rolled onto his side, facing the wall. I stared at the television remote for a long time before realizing I wasn't watching anything. The screen was off. My reflection stared faintly back at me. I picked at the hem of my sleeve. My whole body felt too loud. Not restless. Not anxious. More like something had woken up and didn't know what to do with itself. He shifted under the covers. The sheets rustled softly, and I let myself glance. Once, the line of his back, the curve of his shoulder, a faint mole near his spine. My breath caught. Not from lust, not even desire, just a strange kind of grief. Not about him. About myself. I couldn't remember the last time I had noticed a man's back. That realization hit like a soft punch. I pressed my hands together, knuckles to knuckles, and thought, I'm not lonely. I'm just unseen, not unloved. Mark loved me, in his way, but being loved and being seen are different. One is survival. The other is air. I got up quietly, padded back to the bathroom, and locked the door behind me. Not because I thought he'd follow. He wouldn't. Just because I needed the mirror again. Like it held a truth I couldn't get anywhere else. This time, I stood in front of it longer. Wet hair. Shadowed eyes. Lines around my mouth I didn't remember earning. I pulled my sleeves up to the elbow. Looked at my arms. My hands. Then, finally, I looked at the ring. It didn't shine in this light. It just sat there. Plain. Familiar. Heavy. I lifted my hand. twisted it once, then let go. Not to remove it, not yet, just to feel what it meant. This ring is not a prison, I told myself. It's a choice I made, a life I live, a shape I built. But suddenly, I didn't know who had made the shape. Had I? Or had I followed instructions so long I forgot I was allowed to color outside them? I stayed in the bathroom until my legs ached from standing. When I stepped out, Dylan was on his back again, eyes closed. The storm had softened into a steady thrum. The air in the room felt heavier now, but not from humidity. It was something else. Something neither of us was saying. I lay down on the blanket on the floor, used my jacket as a pillow. He didn't move, but after a few minutes, I heard him whisper, "You okay?" And I answered truthfully, "I don't know." Silence. Then, softly, "Me neither." I didn't sleep much. Not because of the storm, because my own thoughts were louder. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the slow movement of him lifting his shirt. Not the muscles, not the curve of his shoulder. The ease, the lightness. Like he'd peeled something off and wasn't afraid of what was underneath. And I realized I'd forgotten what it felt like to shed. At one point, near dawn, I sat up in the dark, reached for the ring, twisted it once, then again, and then let it be, just for a little longer. I woke before him. Or maybe I hadn't really slept. I couldn't be sure. The room was gray with early light. That soft, unsure hour between night and morning when everything feels possible and impossible at once. The rain had stopped sometime during the night. All that remained was the gentle dripping from the eaves, like the sky had forgotten how to stop crying completely. I was lying on top of my jacket, curled awkwardly on the floor. My hips ached. My neck worse. My body had never learned to rest on hard surfaces, no matter how tired it was. I sat up slowly. Dylan was still on the bed, one arm draped over his eyes, the sheet low on his hips, chest bare to the cold air. His hair stuck up in all directions. He looked younger in sleep. And older, too. I didn't look for long. Instead, I stood. Quietly, stretched my arms above my head, trying to wake my spine. My reflection flickered faintly in the black screen of the TV, a woman in a crumpled dress, hair wild, no makeup, no softness. I didn't flinch. I didn't feel like her. I padded to the bathroom again, more for the silence than the mirror this time. But I flicked on the light anyway, and there she was, that same face. My face. My lips were pale. My skin had that sallow morning hue. The shadows under my eyes felt permanent. But there was something else too. An awareness. As if I'd spent so long looking away from myself that now, when I really looked, I startled. Back in the room, Dylan was stirring. He stretched, rubbed a hand over his face, then glanced over at me with that half-sleep look, the kind that doesn't register much at first. Then he blinked again, really seeing me, and sat up. "Hey," he said, voice gravel-soft. "You sleep at all?" "A little." He nodded, looked toward the window. Skies clearing. It was. Pale blue streaked through the clouds, thin light breaking across the parking lot outside. We didn't move. It felt wrong to move too fast. Like it would shatter something that hadn't even solidified yet. He swung his legs over the bed and sat up. The sheet slipped off his lap. He didn't seem to notice. Or care. He wasn't posturing. He wasn't trying to impress or tempt or challenge. He was just there, present, undressed and undisturbed. I'd forgotten what that kind of comfort looked like. Or maybe I'd never known it. We dressed without conversation. I found a comb in my bag and ran it through my tangled hair. He folded the thin motel blanket and placed it back on the shelf, neat without being meticulous. No one said it out loud, but we were both waiting. For what? I wasn't sure. Not an apology. Not an explanation. Just something. He picked up his phone from the nightstand, checked it, then set it back down. Then he looked at me. But not like before. Not like someone trying to decipher me. More like someone who had already heard the answer but wasn't sure how to ask the question again. "You okay?" he asked. That was the second time he'd asked it. I gave the same answer as before. "I don't know." But this time I smiled when I said it. He didn't smile back. Just nodded and looked down at my hand. I don't remember the exact moment I sat in the chair again. Only that I was there, knees pulled up, hands clasped in my lap, while he zipped his duffel bag. The storm had passed, the room was brighter, and there was nothing left to say. I looked at the bed, the corner where he'd slept, the shape of him still faintly impressed in the sheets. And my hand went to my ring. I didn't think about it. I didn't plan it. It wasn't dramatic or painful. I just twisted it once. The metal slid easily. I looked down at it, still sitting at the base of my finger. No resistance. No tightness. No mark where it had been. Then again. And again. And then I pulled. It came off too easily. No sound. No finality. Just a movement. A quiet, unremarkable movement that somehow made everything else sharper. I held it for a second, between thumb and forefinger. It looked smaller than I remembered. I set it on the table beside me, just placed it there, like a coin, like something temporary. Dylan turned slightly. His eyes moved to the table, paused, then to my hand, and I saw it in his face, the stillness. He didn't ask, didn't say a word, but something shifted between us. He knew, not the details, not the history, but enough. We sat there for a long moment, not facing each other, not touching, but present, held in that moment by something I didn't have the language for. I could hear my pulse in my ears. I felt more naked than if I'd taken off all my clothes. That little ring, no longer on my finger, it had been the last shape holding everything in place. Without it, I wasn't a wife in that room. I wasn't a mother. I wasn't anyone's anything. I was just me. And I didn't hate it. I didn't feel guilt. Only the echo of something long unspoken. Eventually, he stood, lifted his bag. "You ready?" I nodded. Took the ring from the table and slipped it into my purse. Not my finger. My purse. We walked out together. Into the quiet, post-storm morning. We didn't speak on the drive back. Not about the motel. Not about the ring. Not about anything. Just music and road and the occasional passing truck. But silence didn't feel heavy this time. It felt earned. When we pulled into the driveway, Mark was already outside, waving. He walked to the truck, cheerful, oblivious. "How was the detour?" "Fine," Dylan said, climbing out. Mark opened my door, offered a hand. I took it. I smiled. Said nothing. Later, I stood in the kitchen rinsing a glass and felt the weight of the ring in my purse. It was still there. I thought about putting it back. I even took it out, held it in my palm, but I didn't slip it on. I set it in a drawer by the sink, closed it, and didn't open it again for days. I didn't put it back on that day, or the day after, or the one after that. It wasn't a decision, not really. It just didn't feel necessary. My hands felt lighter without it, like my fingers had forgotten how to close around something so final. The ring sat in the kitchen drawer beside rubber bands, broken pens, and expired coupons, the forgotten tools of a household. It looked out of place there, too deliberate among all the things we kept but never used. Mark didn't notice. He kissed my temple every morning before work. I made coffee. He took his mug in the travel thermos I'd bought him for Father's Day 3 years ago. He said, "Love you," on his way out. I set it back. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the same kind of truth it had once been. I didn't see Dylan again for a while. Weeks passed. I ran errands, folded laundry, shuffled through school permission slips and dental appointments. I took walks in the evening and came home smelling like fall. Leaves had started to drift down in slow spirals. The world was turning colder, but not yet cruel. That's what it felt like, a soft warning. One afternoon, Mark found the ring. I was wiping down the counter when he held it up between his fingers, brows drawn together like he couldn't remember what he was holding. This was in the drawer. I paused, wiped the cloth along the sink edge. Yeah, I said. You took it off? My mouth opened, but I wasn't sure what was going to come out. So I just nodded. He waited. I could feel his eyes on me, not angry, not afraid, just confused. You okay? He asked. Not suspicious. Not tender. Just flat. I forced a smile. I think so. He didn't press. Just nodded, set the ring back in the drawer, and went upstairs. That night, I sat alone in the living room. The house hummed, refrigerator, heater, the quiet tick of a wall clock. The TV was off. I didn't need the noise. I pulled the ring out of the drawer and held it in my palm again. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about Mark. It wasn't about Dylan. It was about who I became when I put it on. And who I allowed myself to be when I didn't. That's the thing no one tells you. The real transformation isn't sudden. It doesn't happen with a kiss, or a fight, or a confession. It happens in small, silent moments. In the morning light when you notice your face looks a little softer in the mirror without expectation painted across it. It happens when your fingers no longer feel the absence of the ring. When the space left behind stops pulsing. When the ache becomes air. Dylan texted me 2 weeks later. Just one message. Hope you're well. That's all. I stared at it for a long time. My thumbs hovered over the screen. I could have said something easy, something polite, something distant. Instead, I locked the phone, slipped it into the drawer next to the ring. I needed space between what had happened and what I might let happen next. Not out of fear, out of protection. Not for him. For me. Mark didn't ask again. We settled into a rhythm that looked, from the outside, like contentment. People commented on how calm I seemed lately. You look like you've been sleeping better, someone said at work. I nodded, smiled. No one asked if the calm was a surface. No one asked if it was a disguise. I didn't tell anyone. Not about the motel. Not about the storm. Not about the moment in the chair, the twisting, the slip. It wasn't something that needed to be confessed. Because it wasn't a sin. It was a shift. And once you shift, the world around you doesn't always notice, but you do. You notice in the way your feet find new weight on the floor. In the way your body takes up space. In the way you finally stop apologizing to the mirror every morning. One Saturday, I ran into Dylan at a gas station. He was wearing a flannel shirt and jeans. Wind in his hair. He looked like someone who had learned how to be alone without being lonely. He didn't smile immediately. Neither did I. But we both stood there, between 2 rows of pumps, and let the stillness stretch. Hi, I said. Hey, he replied. A pause. Long, heavy. Have you been? Good. Quiet. Yeah, he said, me too. I didn't mention the text. He didn't mention the ring. We just stood there for a while, like 2 people who had shared something real and didn't need to pretend it was anything less. When I turned to go, he didn't stop me. But he did say, I remember it. That was all. He didn't say what it was. He didn't need to. I nodded once, over my shoulder. So do I. I didn't tell Mark. But that night, I made dinner slowly. I poured myself a glass of wine before he got home, and I stood at the stove without rushing. I burned the edges of the chicken on purpose just to scrape them clean. It felt like proof that I was still real. Mark came home late. He was tired. He didn't kiss me. He didn't notice the ring wasn't on my hand when I handed him his plate. It took me 6 more weeks to move the ring to a new drawer. Not out of shame. Just because I was done being reminded. I placed it in the back of my closet in a little velvet box I hadn't opened in years. Tucked it beside a sweater I no longer wore and a scarf I never liked. I didn't say goodbye to it. I just let it rest. Sometimes I wonder if Dylan thinks of me. I don't think he's waiting. He doesn't strike me as someone who believes in waiting. He strikes me as someone who lives where the truth is and lets people come if they can bear it. He peeled something off me that night, not clothing, not shame, not expectation. Just the lie that I was still the same. I started taking longer walks, longer showers. I stopped asking myself if I should say certain things and just said them. Sometimes Mark looked surprised. Sometimes he looked grateful. Sometimes he didn't look at all. We didn't talk about the change. He never said the words, "You've drifted." But he knew. And I think, quietly, a part of him accepted it. Not because he understood, but because he could feel the water moving and didn't have the strength to stop the current. Months passed, and the ring stayed buried. I found myself reaching for different things. A book I hadn't finished. A lipstick I hadn't worn in years. A photograph from before I was married, before I was anyone's anything. I didn't want to go back. I wasn't nostalgic. I was building something new. Not loud. Not radical. Just mine. Once, during dinner, Mark looked at me over his wine glass and said, "You feel far away lately." I paused, fork midair. I thought about lying. I thought about saying I was tired, or distracted, or overwhelmed. Instead, I said, "I think I'm just trying to be closer to myself." He blinked. Set the glass down. "What does that mean?" "I don't know yet." He didn't ask again. And I was grateful. Because I wasn't ready to give it away. Not yet. I haven't seen Dylan since that gas station. Maybe I won't. But I remember the way he looked at me. Not like a mystery, not like an answer, but like a mirror. Like someone who had also taken something off and found the air easier to breathe without it. I still haven't put the ring back. It's not a rebellion. It's not a threat. It's just a decision I keep making every day. Quietly. Without words. With the space between breaths. With the steady beat of a woman who took her shape back, not all at once, not with fire, but with silence. With stillness. With the softest kind of freedom. The kind no one else notices. Until you no longer care if they do.